I think it's a hard question, you know, I mean, to answer. No, in my case, no, the invitation was to go back to IPEA, which I previously worked there, so it made sense. And then they said, "Oh, you should explain what that is." IPEA is a government think tank, you know, 300 researchers there, big think tank. They used to work there in the 90s, like FGV. So if I don't go to IPEA, what I'm doing, you know, I have to go there, you know, to accept the invitation, but I never thought of being a policymaker, going to work with social policies all my life, but I didn't have these. My father always advised against that. Don't do that, okay? And then I received an invitation to become the interim minister of strategic affairs, together with IPEA, and also had the council of social development there. We had 3 jobs at the same time, in a started to be very tense. And what I learned from this process, I was always a very easygoing person, you know, for a while, is that you have to have the ability of getting addicted to problems. That's the main attribute a policymaker has. You have to like the problems. If you don't like the problems, you know, it doesn't come a bomb in your desk every night, it explodes, you are not alive. Okay, so it's, but as I said, I think that, you know, you are happy without being a policymaker, and you don't know that. You know, you get addicted. I think it took for me like 3 years to get to normal, back to normal. You know, I'm not very normal yet. So I think it's because I think people get addicted to pressure. Don't understand. We had the former president of Dilma. I look at her and say, come on, she's an old lady. How she can get so much pressure every day? She gets, you know, beaten in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night, and she's still there, you know, like an old lady and very tough, and you get used to that.
How do you hold researchers accountable?
I think that the researchers are more, I think there is an accountability process through, you know, the publication process. I think there is a way, there is a body of, you know, I mean, institutional, maybe the connection, because maybe something I would like to put on the table, because we have like the researchers, the universities, you have the government, then you have like activities like Elia was showing or was discussing. And how about think tanks? What are the role of think tanks, which are not exactly like universities and more like specialized in this connection, but maybe so yourself more like a academic research from a university, like this university or a think tank. FGV, where I work, started to look more into a think tank perspective, and I think it makes sense. I mean, it has good parts and bad parts too. One point to the, I think that if these international forums that we are in, I think it's very important for, you know, holding accountable not only researchers, but policymakers. I think it's international, and I think, you know, like things like SDGs, MDGs, and things, it's something that didn't exist 20 years ago, and I think today, although I think will be at least from the perspective of Brazil, there will be a backlash in these references. I feel that, but I think we have some things which we didn't have many years ago, which help, you know, and I think the international forums is a big part of that, because it's neutral ground for, you know. Take a bit of Elia point, you know, what was the turning point, you know. I never thought of going to be a policymaker was always thought myself as a researcher. And I think my big experience, my most important experience, was designing a conditional cash transfer, in Rio, where I live. Was an opportunity I had, and I think I learned a lot because I was hired to build this program, and it was interesting because it was built from the FGV computers. It was not like and we had this whole structure of administrative records already going on in the country because of Bolsa Familia and conditional cash transfers that was already working. And first thing I learned from this experience is that, as a researcher, I would go to the census, I would go to lots of different evidence, to try to see the robustness and to be secure about what I was doing. But the main thing was to work with the administrative data. That's where you have the address, you have this is where the match will be decided there. And so for my surprise, now this is a demand-driven. I think it's also a point of Elia. Look at demand. I think both as researchers and policymakers, we are very supply-driven. We think we have a good idea, and we try to implement that. And we don't hear so much the demand, and I think demand is crucial. These conditional cash transfers is a broad program. So you can make connections, demand connections of different policies. For example, in Rio, we had already ongoing proficiency tests going at every public school, etc. So let's create a grant for those kids who improve their grades, or create a conditionality for parents that go to schools, and this experience in some way, that's what led me to be a policymaker later. But I think that was the most important and most interesting, because I think to do this experience is from the universities, from the think tank. I think once you cross the border, you enter in a government, you participate, you lose something as well. It's very nice to work in a university where you are independent, you can work for, you can talk about with different parties, with different, you have some sort of freedom, which is very very precious. So to complete one example about directions, for example, in this conditional cash transfer, we would like that the mayor adopt a target on the square poverty ratio, okay? The square poverty ratio, you have to choose that. How are you going to convince the mayor that has to choose the first thing? Don't call square poverty ratio. Say P2, P0, P1, it's just big, it's a simple and nice nickname. And the second thing, you design the whole program using P2, doing the logic, and then you come to the mayor and say, okay, you want to fill 50% of your targets, or you want to fill 95% of your targets? He prefers 95%. Why? Because it was everything designed for P2, not for P0. So, and I think my experience, my big surprise was that, we had so much infrastructure already set. The big win was 10 years ago when we created administrative records for the whole country, etc. Now you're just picking, short, apples, that are close to the ground. And I think it was just the beginning, this process. And I think that sometimes you design a program, you run a program, and I think Brazil, we have a big problem. We don't have so much evaluation of policy. That's the problem. I want to hear your perspective of how to make evaluations. In Brazil, the government get by without being evaluated. There's a lot of monitoring, a lot of data. That's why you can build policies on that, but not evaluation. So we try to do, when the government create protocols, what is an evaluation? But it was very hard to go through that, because if the government can, he won't be evaluated, at least, you know, it's the 2 points in the last minute I would like to emphasize here is that from the research, you can do sometimes policy themselves, or quasi-policies. For example, to inform the population about the returns of education, that's a simple result of many of our works, return to education, earnings, and done, and communicate this to the population itself is a policy, in the sense that there are some works which show that this has an impact on the decision, etc. So sometimes, I think we have the tools, we have the conditions to affect what we want, and maybe we're thinking of, constructing a long road, etc. And sometimes you have these possibilities. And one last point, which I think I learned through the hard way, which is, I think we have to find tools to hear the population. Brazil is in the middle of a big crisis now, and if you look at labor market data, the poverty data, and things like that, this thing didn't show up until 2014, 2015, but opinion polls, what people thought, this was already showing something was wrong, 4 or 5 years earlier. So I heard, in a way, it's to listen to the population in a systematic way. You have participatory forums and things like that, but I'm talking about opinion polls that ask the population directly what you think about education, health, and other things. So I think this is, but I want to hear from Simon about how you do it to get an evaluation, this type of experience, the demand for evaluations.